For everyone here, Ethan is the founder and CEO of Beyond Meat, a company that many recognize as leading the charge to make meat from plants. Many of you have probably also tried his products, which as of September of last year, you can find at approximately 122,000 retail and food service outlets in more than 80 countries worldwide. With their IPO in 2019, Beyond Meat is carrying the torch for plant-based food companies as they pursue mainstream adoption in the US and around the world. And the company continues to truly go beyond. Today, Ethan will talk to us about how Beyond Meat and athletes are fueling the plant-based movement. Thank you again for being here today.
Jordan, it's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about this subject. It's one that I'm very passionate about, and also has a link to Berkeley. My brother was a lacrosse player there when I was growing up, and so I used to spend a lot of time there and running the hills around the campus and everything. So it was a wonderful place and a great place to be in school. Okay, so just wanted to dive into this a little bit of history. If you go to the next slide. Is that showing on your screen? Because it's not, there we go, perfect. Okay, so the basic reason I wanted to share this particular slide is, Gandhi once said that Western civilization is an idea worth trying. And by saying that, he was saying that, it may not be a success. And I think we need to think about modern agriculture in its current form in the same way, that it was an idea worth trying. But as we look at the overall composition of what's going on, there are very significant challenges. And so it worked for a long time. This period from about 12,000 years to today, we went through incredible innovation. And even in the last 100 years, in terms of increasing the yields of our fields, 1,000-fold increase in soy production and corn, et cetera. And we're also able to increase the output per animal. But at a certain point, this system has started to fail in how it serves us. And the four parameters that we look at Beyond Meat and try to think differently about agriculture are captured on the next slide. So if you think about where we headed and where we got to with agriculture from, initially finding species that would become domesticated, and we tried all kinds of different animals. This is in the Fertile Crescent at the beginning of modern agriculture, and finally settled on things like goats and chicken, cows and pigs, et cetera. But as we scaled that, and as we modernized that, and as we got to where we are today, we started to run into these issues. And whether it's around human health and the connection between very high levels of animal protein consumption and things like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, or the consumption of refined grains and the challenges that is having on the human body. And you look at climate, and many people have said different numbers around the total impact of livestock on greenhouse gas emissions. And so there's a range from anywhere from 14.5% to 51%. But I think the main message is very significant. And I actually left the fuel cell sector, where I was working for a terrific company that was focused on hydrogen-powered proton exchange membrane fuel cells for transportation, and got into this field because I felt that, and I still believe that agriculture and livestock has a bigger impact on climate than the automobile. When you look at global resource constraints, and so what we have in our economic thinking and in our populations is kind of almost infinite growth within a constrained and finite ecosystem. And at some point, you're going to run into very significant tensions, and that point has long passed. Our carrying capacity and the Earth's carrying capacity is increasingly challenged. And so how do we use the resources that we have differently? And when you think about the amount of water that's required for a pound of meat, particularly red meat, et cetera, you begin to say, okay, well, is there a more efficient way to do this? And then finally, animal welfare. Never before in history have there been more living creatures confined than there are today. And that's just by virtue of the size of our population and the attempts to feed it through animal protein production. So a system that maybe worked in the beginning matured to the point where it may be not able to serve us in the way that we want. And we have to begin to rethink that, and that's what we're trying to do at Beyond Meat. Next slide. Okay, and so if you take a step back and you think about what meat is, it's really actually just 5 things at a super high level. It's amino acids, it's lipids, it's trace minerals, it's vitamins, it's water. What's amazing about, and if you can go to the next slide, what's amazing about the earth is that all of life is united, and you can click one more time, in its constituent parts. And what I mean by that is that our bodies are made from things like amino acids and lipids and made of nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, et cetera. And that is prevalent throughout the plant kingdom as well. And so what the animal is doing is they're consuming material, large amounts of plant material and large amounts of water. They're organizing that in a particular structure that we have become familiar with and call it meat. But there's nothing to stop us from taking those same inputs directly from plants and skipping the animal and putting those in that architecture. And that architecture is well known. You can go to any meat science department in the country, of which there are many good ones. You can open a meat science textbook and it'll show you the composition of meat. And so instead of focusing on the origin of Beyond Meat, we focus instead on the composition. And this allows us to put all the good stuff that's in meat, or try to, in it, and then take out some of the things that are maybe deleterious to the human body. And so it's an opportunity to start with a blank canvas and to say, okay, if we're going to build meat directly from plants, what do we want to put in and what do we want to leave out? That gets me to athletes. Go to the next slide. Okay, you can click twice. One more time. Okay, so what this slide should represent, here we go. When you begin to ask yourself, all right, how am I going to build a piece of meat? So not create a meat substitute or not create something that slightly approximate a piece of animal protein, but actually try to recreate it, to understand at its molecular level what meat is, and then rebuild it directly from plants. You can use different approaches. And so I always say you have to ask 2 questions. What can science do? And that's a very commonly asked question across all industries. But the second question, which I think sometimes people forget to ask, is what should science do? And I think in answering that question, you have to pay very careful attention to the history of unintended consequences. You also have to listen to consumers. And so we've been doing that at Beyond Meat for a long time. And I look at things like, let's say the advent of DDT, which, in fact, the person that realized the usefulness of that as a pesticide was given the Nobel Prize for good reason, because of the ability to curb malaria and yellow fever and things of that nature. But then it led to wholesale applications in industrial agriculture and did horrible things, which gave birth to this, one of the founding books of the environmental movement, Silent Spring. And so just because we can invent something and just because we can create something doesn't necessarily mean that we can use it in all applications. And so at Beyond Meat, we have very strict guardrails, which are not to use GMOs and to keep as much of the stuff that's in meat that is causing issues in the human body out of it. So next slide. So we're very committed to using only what nature has provided. Why this is important, and particularly to athletes, is that we're not going to be adding things into the product that are going to lead to additional inflammation or going to be synthetic in nature that may cause issues that we're not yet aware of. So we're committed to taking the core parts of meat directly from plant sources and then utilizing technologies, specifically heating, cooling, and pressure, to stitch them together in the structural function of animal protein. Next slide. You can keep going. Okay, so start with a blank canvas. Take the good stuff from plants directly, the amino acids, the healthier lipids, the trace minerals, vitamins, and of course water. Build those in the architecture of animal protein. But you want to know, is this actually healthier for the human body, right? Or is everything that we're saying, does it have statistical data behind it? So we wanted to start to build a library of that data. And so one of the first studies that we did is with Stanford, which is called the Swap Meat Program. And we had folks, we gave them money and took a disinterested role. That's obviously the way universities work. They're not going to leverage or they're not going to sacrifice their reputation for our direction. And so we had them work with 2 populations, one that was consuming animal protein for 8 weeks every meal, then one that was consuming Beyond Meat for 8 weeks every meal. And the differences were absolutely amazing. We saw a statistically significant and a clinically significant decline in LDL, or what's called bad cholesterol. And we also saw TMAO levels drop. And TMAO is something that's really interesting. It's one of the biomarkers for heart disease. And so in both cases, we saw these really, really significant gains when you switch from an animal-based to a plant-based diet, including Beyond Meat. And what's happening here is really around inflammation. And it's something I'll talk about as we go on. Next slide. Okay, so I like to always say a brand is good, but a movement is better. And when you're trying to build something that's not only good for the human body, but is also good for the earth, people want to be involved in that. And that's what's been such a blessing to our business. And so as we began to build the business, we didn't just take on investment from just strictly financial interest, but we also wanted to bring in people that could live and represent the brand in a way that we felt really comfortable with. And something started to happen. We started to have a number of athletes come into our program, and the reason for that had to do with they started to see that it helped their performance. We also were able to talk with them about, for this generation that's coming up now. So my generation, this is something some of you recognize, some of you won't. The National Dairy Boards, California Dairy Board, they were running these really, really expensive campaigns, milk as a body good, and then followed by the milk mustache campaign, or got milk campaign. And that made a huge impression on my generation, right? You'd go into your cafeteria at school and you'd see pictures of famous athletes with milk and a milk mustache, right? So we said, because we know this is so good for the body, let's create a program for this generation that furthers this notion that a plant-based diet will help them thrive, not only athletically, but off the court as well, or off the field as well. And so athletes started to come into our program. Go to the next slide. And the next one. And they started to become very natural advocates for it. And so what's happening, and what I described this a little bit just a minute ago, when you start to reduce your animal protein consumption, start to increase your plant-based protein consumption, some really interesting things happen. It really has to do with the changes that occur in the gut as you begin to change your diet. So animal protein will lead to pro-inflammatory responses from your immune system. And those begin in the gut and they permeate your body. What we're finding is that plant-based protein sources not only don't do that, but they contain many other elements that reduce and lead to decreased inflammation. Now, if you're an athlete, why is that important? It means that you can train very hard one day, consume the type of meals that we're talking about, and the next day have less inflammation. And then over time have less inflammation. And with less inflammation, you perform better. That's not only good for women and men who are in their 20s and 30s competing professionally, but in terms of your overall life and as you age, it's really good for staving off or reducing probability of having all these kind of different inflammatory diseases that are increasingly linked to the gut and to the reaction in the gut to particularly dietary choices we have. Everything from dementia to Alzheimer's to heart disease and many other instances of chronic disease. Next slide. Okay, so this is just I think a fun example of the synergies you get when I always say that marketing is a lot easier when you're just telling the truth. And what's so great about this is that we went out into the market, we tried to explain what we're doing. We encouraged athletes to consume our products and to come into a plant-based diet. And then the rest kind of starts speaking for itself. So we'll show this quick video.
I think there's a delay when I click your slides, by the way. So sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, so there's some other stuff after we can keep going though. Go to the next slide.
This is also a video. You want me to play it?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll explain this real quick. So Chris Paul, who's an all-star with the NBA, got onto or started working with us, became plant-based as an athlete, and the more time we spent with him, the more we realized what a personal benefit this was delivering to him. He would explain that he sometimes would come home from practice and forget to ice, which was very unusual. So now I think he's in his 15th year in the NBA. He's 35, and this was a 2020 All-Star game. And what was interesting is, again, this speaks to when you're marketing something and there's truth to it, it begins to shift from a brand into a movement. You can hear the commentators talk here about the impact it's having on Chris.
More surprising moments from the weekend. Chris Paul on the receiving end of a Russell Westbrook glove. Did you know he could?
Absolutely. Listen, Rachel CP is
Look at the face.
He's class of 2003, Mickey D's class. We know CP could get up, and he's under the Thunder organization right now. I'm telling you, they put an extra 5 inches on your vertical like they did me at one point of my career.
There you go.
And here's the plant-based diets.
More surprising moments.
Sorry.
Okay, so it sort of goes on with that, and they continue to talk about it. But okay, you can go to the next slide.
Oh, this is also a video.
Yeah, you can skip this one.
Okay. Want me to start here?
Yeah. Okay, and so even as the athletes that use our products are always seeking to improve, at Beyond Meat we have a program called the Beyond Meat Rapid and Relentless Innovation Program, and that's really designed to make the products that are currently on the shelf with the Beyond Meat brand on them obsolete. We are constantly driving toward increasing the quality of our products, increasing the nutritional benefits of our products, and then ultimately reducing the cost. And the belief system there is that if you can get a product that tastes exactly like its animal protein equivalent, that provides a nutritional benefit to the consumer that's clearly understood, and is lower cost than animal protein, it becomes an unusual consumer says, I'm still not going to eat that. And so that's what we're after in this most recent Beyond Burger, the Beyond Burger 3, which we're launching shortly. It was just an effort to do that. So the taste is really good. We've improved on some of the taste. Nutrition continues to improve, where we say, look, 35% less saturated fat than 80/20 beef. We also offered a 55% less saturated fat burger than 80/20 beef. So consumers can pick depending on which one they want. I don't think it's a good idea to load up plant-based burgers with saturated fat or some of the other elements in animal protein that we're trying to get away from, because consumers intuitively think that a plant-based burger is going to be healthy for them, and you really need to carry through on that assumption, and you need to meet that promise that this is going to be something that's going to help their bodies. It's not just enough to say it's great for the environment, but it's not nutritionally sound. We want to make sure that it's both. It's great for the environment and that it's also nutritionally beneficial. Okay, next slide.
Can you see the video?
I can't. So this is, now I can. So this is the last video I wanted to show, and it's really about an ethos around the brand. And if you want to just pause for 1 sec. What we're trying to do is invite as many people possible into this tent and enable them to make lifestyle choices that are better for them and better for the planet. I have a long history with agriculture. I grew up in the city in Washington, D.C. and in College Park, Maryland. My father, who's a professor, had and still does a tremendous interest in agriculture. And so we spent a lot of time on our farm and outside the city. And it was a Holstein dairy operation. And so this is not about attacking that way of life. It's an incredibly solid and amazing part of our culture and our country. But my belief is that by taking the efficiencies that we can gain from shifting to protein that's coming directly from plants, versus running all that plant material through an animal, we can create an amazing story of innovation in agriculture. And if you think about what's happened with the digital economy, over the last 30 years, that's generated an enormous amount of wealth, primarily in our major cities on the east and west coast, tech corridors in Boston and of course Menlo Park and Silicon Valley here in California. But it largely skipped over rural America. This is an opportunity to bring really significant innovation to rural America and to hopefully revitalize some of those communities. When you think about them, we did a study with the University of Michigan where we looked at the overall resource utilization of creating one burger from our process and one burger from bovine or cow. And the numbers are staggering. We use 99% less water. We use 93% less land. So all of that is about efficiency. And if we can give that efficiency to the farmer and help them grow the same amount of food with far less inputs, they can make more money. They can use that land for other things. And so anyway, it's an inclusive brand. We want to welcome people from all walks of life, whether they're on a journey where they're into heavy meat consumption and then maybe just want to substitute it once in a while, or they're a strict vegan. We want them to feel very welcome in our brand. This advertisement we've done here is an effort to communicate that. Maybe glitchy on this, but let's try it, and then I'll wrap up and take questions.
Cool. I'm not sure we'll be able to have time for any questions, but I'll play the video.
What if we took this cow off the table and just made friends with her? What if this guy grew more plants and we got protein from his beans, brown rice, and peas instead and made a great burger? What if burgers got healthier and the food we love had no cholesterol? What if we put it in our carbs, on our menus, on our grills? What if your grandpa ate it, and your whole team, and his whole team? What if it didn't even stop there and we used less land and energy, put less greenhouse gases into the air? What if it was already happening? What if just taking the animal out of the meat made us and our planet healthier? What if we all go beyond?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ethan. And thank you for all the work that you're doing for this movement. Honestly, just to see it grow so much in the last few years, especially with you all leading it, it's been amazing. So.
Well, it's a blessing to be able to do it, and lots of more work to come, and we're all doing it together. Thanks.
Yeah.